The performance area. Alex with ukulele and Kazumi, who identifies as having cerebral palsy, sit side by side. Sage, a deaf performer, interprets at right.
If she stays away, old rocking chair don't get me.
One more.
Once more.
Can't go on. I am stormy weather.
Stormy weather.
Yes, but together. You don't me. Oh, da.
Say what, Kazumi?
You don't me. Oh, da.
Prince, Brian, Miles, and Jessica sit in the conversation circle. Prince is in his 30s and is a tall and slender black man. He has scarring from burns on his face and head. He is a double amputee, right arm above the elbow and left below. Jessica is a 5'4" woman with light brown hair. She is blind and is not a cane user. She is white, in her mid-20s, and wears glasses. Brian is a two-spirited Anishinaabe Irish man. At the end of his left forearm is a handless stub with 5 very small nubbins with no bones. In his words, it is Tim Burton-esque. Miles is a white, late-20s man who uses an electric wheelchair and has a buzz cut.
There we go. Hello, hello. Our next conversation is protocols for change. I think a lot of things that will come up in this may echo some of the conversations we've been hearing already, bringing up things that are working or not working and where we want to go with this. So let's talk a little bit about what we want in the future and what's working and what's not working for us, and some sort of manifesto we can build or create, which I think this event is beginning, hopefully, and furthering into something more. This Republic of Inclusion. So I don't know if anyone has anything they want to start off with before, shall we?
Yeah. Hi, this is Jessica speaking. I've been thinking a lot about what the words of this conversation mean. So like, what does a protocol mean? What is the word for? Like, who is this protocol for? And then change, and what does change mean? And so I don't have a definition or an answer, which seems to be another theme from from the Republic, which is great, because I think part of this process is making people think. And so I just want to interrogate that a little bit as we go around the circle and for everyone else in the room. When we say protocol, does that mean something we all follow? Is that something that we say out loud, similar to a manifesto? Is that something that we say out loud? Is that something we share? Is that something, who owns that? These are the kind of questions that I'm kind of thinking about, and when we talk about who it's for, is it for us as disability identified performers and creators? Is it for the people who are potentially exterior to our to our needs and to our experiences? Again, no answers. And then change. What does change mean? I guess that's a simple question, but it doesn't seem like it to me, because what are we changing? Are we changing the way we gather, the way we create, the way we are seen? These are all things we want to change. I don't know. You all might be nodding, probably not. But it's something that for me is really profound when thinking about these conversations. And that's the end of my current thought.
Brian sits one leg tucked under him, barefoot.
Ani bozu, Brian Indigenikas, Jiba Naning Ndunjaba, Nishnabea Gukwe. Hello, my name is Brian, speaking. I'm Ojibwe, and I'm Irish, and you can call me Ojibberish. And that is our protocol, is to introduce ourselves that way. But even still, in this format, I feel rushed to do it. And you'll see other Indigenous people that have similar ways of introducing themselves. They've got this sort of way that it's squeezed into the form and gets administered. And this is the theme for me, you know, how are things getting administered? Speaking to what Eliza spoke about earlier, the precariousness of the situation that we're put in. You know, we get offered money and funds to do these things, and we're obviously underfunded peoples, and we then are expected to speak for everyone. And the notion of space and taking up space and giving space, I think people need to check themselves and really do a lot of meditation over the types of things that take up space. So I'm taking up space right now. I have a microphone. The person who built the microphone is taking up space in this room. Whoever designed this room, which I really like this room, is taking up space. It is the space for now. But we have a saying back home. You walk in the door, sit down, shut up. We're already talking. Sit down, shut up, gets past some food. There's already a conversation that's going on. So I really hope people can take away that. I feel like I need to sit down and shut up. Justin, my brother, explained a little bit in previous conversation about where we're entering this realm. And one of the reasons where we're entering this realm later is because of our cultural experiences and from where we're from. There's a lot of people from various cultural backgrounds, socioeconomical situations that don't make it to this room. So sit down, shut up was also echoed in a teaching around canoes, which is a big theme in my life. Bob Baker, an elder, gave me a teaching, and sidebar, we always, our people, acknowledge where things have come from. We don't take ownership after we've learned something. We acknowledge where we were taught something. He was talking about the practice of journeying in canoes, as my people journey in canoes, and so did his. And if you're entering the canoe journey as a woman or a man, or those are words that people didn't use, but I'm using now, you, as a young person entering the canoe trips that have already gone on for millennia, since time immemorial, you're entering a tradition that's already existed. And you don't speak for the first year that you're a part of it. So you're doing work, you're laboring, you are, you're helping pack the canoe, you're paddling the canoe, but in the meetings, at the beginning and at the end of the day, you don't speak. That's giving space. And I hope people interrogate this room. This is the most immediate example I can pull upon, because my experience in the DisArts world is so limited. I can mostly just speak to this conference, which I'm so grateful to be given the space that's happened. But I think many people who've been a part of it for the long haul would agree that the greatest part of it was the space we carved out for ourselves in it. So where space was taken from us within it is when decisions are made for us. You know, I did a panel I brought up with some of you in earlier discussions where I could read from the application that the person wasn't Indigenous, but they were positioning themselves as though they were Indigenous. And it was incredibly scary, because I was going to have to speak in front of people and assert that this person was not Indigenous, and I only did after a lot of research into them on my own. But if you read situations, you can tell who has organized things. And I really know that this conference, there have been a lot of people from our community that have organized it, but I know that the majority have not. And I just know that by how it looks and how it feels. And I hope that you don't get confused by this with, or confuse what I'm saying with biting the hand that feeds. But if you want to be disrupted, you're going to use that word. You're going to use our word. You know, the disruption is here. There's a lot of things we did not design, and they've been hard to deal with. So the greatest way as a protocol going forward is you want to help out, you want to give space, actually give the space. The smallest thing, deciding what a group is eating, deciding who is cast in a reading, deciding everything, deciding what hotel we are at and then change from, deciding what city the thing is in. We can all do this. We are a room full of incredibly accomplished and able people. So thank you for the space. In the future, I would really like to see, you know, help looks like providing funds and then stepping back, you know? And you can congratulate yourself for providing the funds, but we are all very capable to design things. So don't be fooled, anyone who's just walking into this room, and think that I designed it or anyone here designed it. Many people have designed it, and I'm thankful for that. But don't assume that we did it, and then don't take ownership for it. Welcome to the Republic. That's my final thought.
Hi, this is Miles speaking. Oh, it's weird to hear yourself. Hello. When I think about change, what springs to my mind is the word freedom. And that means freedom to practice my art and make the art I want to make and tell the stories that I feel compelled to tell as an individual. But in a more practical sense, it means freedom for me in terms of, I've got a film I'm a filmmaker, that's primarily my background. I have limited theater experience. And the thing that I face most often when I'm like day and a half, 2 days away from mounting a production, once everything's written and crew's locked down, is, fuck, how am I going to get into the space? There's stairs, and we've got this wonderful building that we need to shoot in. That wasn't, to sort of echo what you said, that I wasn't consulted in the design process for. Now, I am one in a city of, I live in Winnipeg, I am one in a city of about 900,000, so I don't expect the city planners to come to my door every time they're putting together a building, but at least consult with those of us who have, and I don't mean to inaccurately co-opt what you've said, Brian, but there are those whom aren't consulted when a space is designed in a truly practical sense. And one of the things that I've been fortunate enough to find is a team of writers, cinematographers, and production crew, whom all dear friends of mine, who also are prepared to help see a way through a physical obstacle that I might be encountering, be it as a director or as a performer. If I can't get into the space, sometimes it means I bring my manual wheelchair and I get hauled up and down stairs like a sack of potatoes twice a day as we start and as we wrap the shoot, or we run 100 feet of cable so I can stare at a monitor from outside the room and kind of do the thing that I've been asked to do to the best of the access that's been granted to me. And so freedom is the big thing that springs to my mind. Freedom of access, freedom of voice, and freedom of access to not just buildings, but the training. I have had, I'm a student at the University of Winnipeg, and I've had a faculty and staff at my department who have been fantastic in terms of seeing their way to allowing me to take the courses I want to take and study the aspects of theater, both theater and film, that I want to study. But it hasn't been without its battles, most of which I've fought on my own, because I consider the Disability Services Unit at my campus to be, frankly, useless. And it's through no fault of their own. They do provide essential services such as accessible space to write in for those who need quiet spaces, and allowing for extended time for those who need longer time to write exams. But they're so hamstrung with the things that they're able to provide for students that they can't do enough, and so they don't do enough. They've allowed the fact that they're fiscally and culturally hamstrung to leave them hung up and sort of floating in the wind without direction. And it's something I've done, which is I will often coordinate with my profs months in advance. In the summer, I'll get their emails, I'll get phone numbers, and I'll just have all those conversations directly. Because then there's no miscommunication, there's no concern about are we saying the right things, are we being insensitive, are we doing any of the things that we all fear at some level when we're approaching a situation like that, whether it be applying for a grant or going for training. I'm sure we've all had that moment of, oh no, how am I going to be perceived and how am I going to be received? That is the end of my current thought.
Prince stands and takes the mic in his forearms and passes it to Jessica.
Oh, you want to? Okay.
This is Jessica speaking. I heard two words while both Brian and Miles were speaking, design and training. And I think those are two very interesting links to protocol. And I would suggest that the word change, and for me, something that I really picked up on in both of your statements was conversation and dialogue. So protocols aren't stable. They shouldn't be stable, in my opinion. They should be something you converse about constantly with everyone. I know that seems time-consuming, but I mean, Crip Time exists for a reason, so that we can create ways to do that in a way that works for who you're working with. And I do that, there's never a stable way of me accessing a class or a grant or an application. It's always going to be different. And designing things, it's ironic because that's what we're doing tomorrow, and I'm excited for that because I think why don't we redesign a space every time we come into it? Of course, buildings are permanent, but malleable inside spaces, and can that be a protocol for disability and at large, but also disability and performance? We can have models, and we can build on the history and what we've learned from people who've come before us and have done the very good due diligence of having these hard conversations. But I think it's a part of my being as an advocate, as a blind person, as somebody, an artist, as somebody who really cares about performance and really cares about people like me. It's really important to me to do that work. And I said something at the beginning of this conference, way back, 15 billion years ago, feels like, in a good way. But it was right at the beginning where I said, I come here in gatherings and spaces like this to build armor for the energy that it takes to advocate for those protocols, for that change. And I think there's no way that we can get through and create without that energy. And I guess before I ramble more, I would really like to just thank everyone for hearing these words today, because I think we're not going to come up with a protocol. I don't think that was the expectation, but I think hearing the thoughts that we have are important, and that's the end of my current thought.
This is Brian speaking, Ani. Thank you, Jessica, for that. And I hope you don't mind me taking something I've heard you say a few times over the course of the conference, that you wonder if it's even possible, this notion of a entirely inclusive space or situation. And part of me really agrees. It's kind of this super utopian notion that, again, I wonder who designed it, or maybe planted it in there subconsciously, that might be possible. And I also want to speak to what you're speaking about, Miles, with consultation and with protocols not being a static thing, a still thing. Things are in motion as exists. You might have heard Justin and I speak about in our languages, things are constantly in motion. So there needs to be the space for constant consultation with what you're saying. And then I would posit that an entirely inclusive space is the inner space. It must be embodied. There's nothing physically you can do. And I don't know if any architect could design a building that would fit every single type of person. And I commend them for trying, but I don't know if it's possible. But you can do it with your mind and your soul. It can constantly change. And those of us in the room that are very powerful people, that are in charge of festivals, in charge of buildings with an incredible amount of influence, it could feel like saviorism sometimes, and Columbusizing, if you're familiar with those terms, when you create a situation and we're invited into it, we're at the forefront under the lights, not in this space, but in any time you see our people in other festivals, and your ego has not stepped back and allowed us to design it, because that's what makes it inclusive. And that might be asking a big thing. And maybe I'll never work for anyone here again in the room, but Justin already said we already don't get reviews, so this is us creating the space, but an embodied inclusivity mindset. That's my final thought.
Brian hands the mic to Prince.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, it's tough because this event is trying to represent, well, inclusion, yes, but like you said, there are voices missing. So what I'm hearing and what I think we should all take away from this is getting all those other voices that we're trying to help be a part of it, be a part of this creation and everything that we're creating. There's a want and need for change, and to avoid saviorism, yes, get those voices in there. and treat each other as equals. We're all equal. That's what we have to see. We're all equal, as different as we think we are or appear to be. I like to imagine that there's a general kindness in everyone's hearts, but we all approach things wrong or differently or make the mistake of assuming something for someone else. So hopefully what people get, or what I get from this at least, is that it's extremely important to listen and to understand that everyone is an individual and has different needs. And yeah, the protocols are not static or not stable. That, yeah, it's constantly changing, and that the story is changing like life. Everything is growing, changing constantly, so nothing will be solidified. But I'm glad that we're making an attempt. This is an attempt at something. And listening to each other's voices, we're going to get something out of this, I hope. I mean, we have elders who have been doing this and working at this for a while, and you know, things have slowly but surely changing, and some places more than here. I think a gentleman by the name of Frank, who's a dancer here, talked about his frustration of the lack of accessibility here in Canada, and I was a little disappointed to hear that. So he moved to the States, and then I hear Alex talking about open access in England, and I think there's things that we can pull from those to help us build something. You know, get those good things that work for it. But yeah, but there is a lot to be done. And yeah, our voices should have been more included in this. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I hope, and I trust, and I believe that if there is some sort of continuation of this type of event, that we learn from it. And I think we will. I think we will. I don't know if anyone else had anything they wanted to. Yeah.
Prince passes Miles the mic. Miles takes a moment to position it.
Hold on. I'm just gonna move There we go. This is Miles speaking. One of the things that I've learned, particularly about film, because that's where I spend most of my time, is that my industry is a strangely individualist and ego-driven industry. There's a notion that the individual heads of the department are the best in the room, and they're better than the other heads of the department sometimes, and they feel like they could do the other person's job better than the person that was hired to do the job in certain situations. But one of the things that I've learned as a filmmaker, particularly in Winnipeg, because we're such a small community and everybody knows everybody and at some point has worked with or been present with everyone else that's in the scene, is that community, much like being a human being, or film rather, much like being a human being, is a communal effort. We are biologically designed and built, to use that word design again, to be with other people. There have been countless studies done that show that prolonged singlehood, be it in a romantic sense or just isolation, is not good for a human being. And so one of the things that I'm always trying to do is find new artists and new people who are, be they a writer, be they a shooter with a camera, or whatever their expertise might be, somebody that I don't work with regularly, bring them into a project and get their voice involved, get their thoughts heard, and then in turn, what I'll often say to my friends who are looking to shoot a film is, hey, if you need one of my specialties in post-production, I'm an editor, colorist, I can do a couple other things here and there. I often tell them, let me know when you're going for your funding, because I have something that I'm willing to give you in my disability, and then in return, my skills. You're not just getting the wheelchair. You're getting the brain and the body that come with it, But I'm absolutely willing to give those to you if it means you get to tell the story you're dying to tell. So long as I get to give of myself to help you tell that story. And I think that's an important thing, is that we're here as a community of ourselves right now, but I think it's also important that the mainstream world realize how useful we are as artists and how much we can give to their projects, both in terms of making sure that it's a project that we can contribute to as a performer and that we can help to get made just by finding a project that works for us and that fits us and that we're willing to help get funded. Be that in using ourselves on grant applications. And I don't mean that in the exploitative sense. It's important to me that if I'm doing this, it's typically with someone that I know, someone that I trust, someone that I've worked with, and more importantly, a project that I connect with, either emotionally or spiritually, however that may be, or creatively. As long as I connect with it, I'm willing to give whatever of myself needs to be given to make the project. And I think that's something that I have realized in the short 6 years that I've been an artist, is that I think in order for the mainstream, at least from my end, I think in order for the mainstream to give to me, I have to be willing to give without compromise, without selling myself short of my skill sets and my talents and making assumptions about those talents and my fit within the project, and on the other side, allowing them to make assumptions about me as an individual and saying, oh, look at him. He's in a chair, he can't do this, he can't do that. And then I end up at the NAC performing in Brad Fraser's Kill Me Now. I mean, cheap plug time. But I've encountered plenty of that, which it often didn't come in, oh, there's no way he can do it. It often came in you know, muffled whispers of, I'm talking more in the training situations and the academic situations, excuse me, and in the government funding situations and conversations. It came in sentences like, oh, how the fuck are we going to do that? There's no way we can pull this off. We don't have the skills. We don't have the resources. And I'll often stop them and say, you have the only resource you need, me. I can tell you what I need and help you get it if you just shut up for a second, pull your heads out of your asses, and let me contribute to my education and my art and my practice. That's my final thought.
This is Brian speaking. Thank you, Miles. It speaks to me about the notion of fair exchange, which we all have a sense of in our hearts. You can feel it when it feels fair. That's how trade works, and it moves, as you brought up, Jessica, introducing the notion of things moving and not being static, something that can relate to trade, money, currency. Currency is of the word current. It moves. So we are aware when we are being included in grants of the tokenism. We get asked a lot. You're not the first person to ask us. We know how we add to your situation economically. But then it needs to come back. It needs to feel fair. We need to be celebrated for our strengths, which go completely ignored. I believe, as a movement practitioner, that our adaptations, I'm going to just repeat this for people who have heard it already, I believe we have incredible, yet to be discovered strengths in situations. I can only speak to my own, but I know what I do physically and what has gone on in my nervous system, only having one hand. I balance things in ways that other people don't.
Bounces mic off forearm.
Catch things, do things in all sorts of ways. And I know that that's the case for everyone if there's differences in their senses. Landon spoke about hearing with his fingers in the workshop that I led at the beginning of last week. That has not left me. I want 10 years to learn about that. So when you bring us into the room, to use your analogy with the chair, you know, you're so much more than the chair, you know, and we still end up in these positions where our spirits feel that they need to be heard. So we end up in the room, and then we start proving our brilliance. So it ends up inadvertently adding to the situation, and then you stamp it with your title at the end, Changing the Face of Canadian Theatre. I say that not as a direct attack, but when I hear that immediately after it, I want to hear acknowledged who exactly has been changing the face of Canadian theatre. It's my final thought.
This is Jessica speaking. I have a question, and it kind of adds on to what everyone has been just speaking about in terms of protocol. Being somebody who tries to set my own, and I think everybody sets their own daily ones and belief ones and what you value and how you deal it with every day. But I would love to hear what you three think about understanding protocol. This was something that was brought up to me about a year ago when I was giving a land acknowledgement. And I will honestly tell this story. I did not understand what I was saying. And someone asked me, "Why are you saying it then?" And I was like, holy shit. Yeah, and I think, that was just a small, I do know now. But like, you know, I shared that story in confidence. But I shared it because it says something important and about protocol, I think. And for me, it's a part of my protocol, one of my stable protocols, stable in air quotes, is that I know what my protocols are about. So if I'm going scent free, why? Why? If I need to say, this is Jessica speaking, and that's the end of my final thought, know that that's for blind people, because we don't know when you're done talking. We can't see you stop. So, like, there's protocols that we do every day, and you may not know why. And I would just be interested to know your experiences with understanding what protocols are, and if that's been a challenge for you. And that's the end of my current thought.
Hi, it's Miles again. I'll start. The big one I face is I live in an assisted living facility, and everybody's scheduled in terms of when they wake up, when they eat, when they go to bed, all that jazz. And there's tons of room for improv. If you need something in the middle of the day, there are phone numbers you phone. Somebody comes running. And if there's not somebody immediately available, they'll be there within 15 minutes. The biggest understanding issue that I have around that is, let's say we're starting a shoot at 7 in the morning. I've got to phone 6 people and figure out whose time I can borrow to be up for 7 in the morning. And my crew, my teams all understand it, but I've encountered it in broader situations where it's like, oh, well, why can't you just be there for 7? And it's the literal application of what we've been referring to as crip time. I have to use someone else's time. I have to impede on their time to be themselves in order for me to get up and do my job. Whether I'm being paid to do the job or not, it's still a job and it's still work. And so that's like really the toughest thing that I immediately face, is the sense of time and getting the mainstream to understand how different and yet how similar, simultaneously different and simultaneously similar my sense of time is. It often comes down to minutes, but those minutes are important because they're 15 minutes that I need to put on a shirt, put on a leg bag, put on a whatever else, or do whatever else I need to do to be the person that I am trying to be, and then the artist that I'm trying to be, and just a sense of getting people to understand, much as you said, Jessica, why we're ending sentences with "that's my final thought." It's for the visually impaired and the blind folks in the room. Time for me is this thing that I don't understand it. I often wonder why it exists, both in I often mean that humorously and literally. I'm like, why do start times exist? Why do end times exist? Why can't we just be and do and just hit the brakes on the notion of you've got to have the film in by 8 p.m. or you're not going to get your money or such and such a thing. But again, practically speaking, I understand why. That's the dichotomy for me, is that I understand and I welcome the practicality of time and the pressure. It forces me to get things done. Doesn't mean I can't hate it the entire time I'm pressured. That's my final thought.
Brian takes the mic from Miles.
This is Brian speaking. Miles, I'm literally in love with you right now. And there, right, my brain just made this thing. You're not following someone else's protocols. I should be sitting here. I should sound professional. I should try and hide my northern voice, which I have pain for hiding and trying to squeeze into. But again, I hear understanding in what you're saying. Understanding, it must be embodied. You know, people can go through training and go, okay, I need to make space, the door needs to do this, the sink needs to be over here, all this stuff, but they're not meditating on why. And because they're not meditating on why, they then make requests of you, like have this in by 8 p.m. Because they're not seeing it, they've not meditated on it. I face that as someone who is only partially visibly disabled. When you bombard me with emails, and then you become passively aggressive and then aggressive for my lack of response time, I get panic attacks for the amount of emails that pile up. You know, like I will have liquid bowel movements for how stressful it can become. And right now, participating in this conference, all of my other independent engagements are completely suffering because I can't even make the gesture right now of email because I only have one hand to do it, and people forget that all the time because of the brilliance of my adaptations. So I wonder about protocols too. We have this in the Indigenous community all the time. Thank you for being brave enough to admit to that situation. You know, land acknowledgements are all the rage now. Great, but not great. Because I know when I'm sitting back and somebody is mispronouncing the name of a nation, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, can I get some help? Like, that's so offensive. Don't say it at all if you don't understand it. Yeah, protocols must be embodied, and that's come up in the course of the past couple of weeks, and it's come up. Yeah, that's my final thought. Thank you.
Prince speaking.
Yeah, similar to Miles, I know what it's like to have to wake up at a certain time. I also live with assisted living. I acquired my disability a little later in life in 2012, so I'm learning so much and starting to understand so much that I didn't pay attention to because I had that privilege, you know. It feels like jail, you know, having to be ready at a certain time, and if you're not, then you sit around and wait. I mean, at least, you have the ability to call someone and have them come at a certain time. We only have people for a few hours in certain times of the day, like for chunks of the day. So I know people that if they don't have anyone around, they wait in bed for a couple of hours until someone can come by and help them out. And sometimes I'll just go and I'll have to starve if I don't have any meals prepared, and things like that, or if I have to go out and miss my appointment. And so it's been weird adjusting to this new life, and understanding all the ins and outs, and just understanding the lack of accessibility in Canada. I mean, why? We're supposed to be ahead of the game. What's going on here? I remember going out with a friend of mine who's in a wheelchair, and we just wanted to hang out at some bar, and we couldn't get into one of them, not one. And that was the first time it hit me, just the struggles that they have to go through, and how that may lead to someone being isolated and just giving up and not wanting to go out. So there's a lot to work on. Protocols are enough said. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's disappointing. It is. It's really disappointing. And I hope that we can get better here. I mean, I know there's a new act that they're trying to enforce and implement, and we'll see where it goes. But I guess just to sort of close things up now, yeah. Yeah, it's constantly changing. And this is a question that we're going to have all the time, but we have to have those discussions, and we have to be honest about what we do and don't know. Like you said, like you admitted about the land acknowledgements, let's not just play a role, because that's not going to get us anywhere. And that's just going to make things worse, because the truth will come out that, it's just a mask that people are putting on. I don't know if anyone has any closing thoughts before we...
This is Brian speaking. Thank you for that synthesis of the situation, and bravely admitting what the experience is coming to it later. I would say, I do all at once love terminology changing, indigenous resurgence, but understand what that means. If you're going to use the word disrupt, prepare to be disrupted. That's my final thought.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
It's Miles speaking. One of the most important things that I did a lot of press for the show Kill Me Now, and one of the most important things that I was, or one of the things that I was most often asked was, how do you feel about disabled casting in both non-disabled and quote-unquote disabled roles? And I said, look, it comes down to you, they being the person asking the question, or me in the room. That casting director has one job and one job only. Pick the person best for the job. If that's them, that's them. If it's me, it's me. The only other job that casting director has to do, and I say this again, has to do, is give me a shot to roll in the goddamn door. Give me the chance to come in there and fail. Give me the chance to fail. Because you won't know if I'm good or bad or indifferent. I won't know if I'm good or bad or indifferent for the role until someone says, yes, please. And that's all I want, is someone to say, yes, please. That's my final thought.
Thank you. Very well said. All right. Well, thank you all for your honesty and that wonderful conversation, all the conversations we're having today. Cheers.
Jessica and Prince leave the conversation circle. The projection screen is covered with a mass of drawings, mostly in purples, greens, and blues. An anatomical heart, a tree, a face. Numerous words and smaller illustrations pepper the entire image. Rowan stands at the center of the performance area in front of a music stand and a mic on a stand. Rowan is a 5'9" white man with an average build, blonde hair, auburn beard. He has mild cerebral palsy. He organizes some papers, looks up, gives a thumbs up, and nods.
Hello. How you doing? My name's Rowan James. I'm speaking. I'm a poet and a theatre maker, and I'm gonna do some of my poems for you today. I'm just letting that conversation sink in and seeing if I've got any wisdom to add, and I haven't. So this poem is called Labels, and it goes like this. Disabled, unstable, labels hanging from my navel, with a locket round my neck, with a list of what I can't do and a shorter one of what I'm able. Because is it a bread roll with a hole in, or is it actually a bagel? Is it a wooden platform on stilts, or is it actually a table? And if one of those legs was broken and it was propped up with books, would it still fall under the same label? Holler at the holy saucepan that's actually a colander, because every utensil has to have a label, whether it's a serving spoon or actually a ladle. Holler at the man whose life is lived, trying to strain his pastas, surrounded by colanders looking for a sieve. That's a strainer. Thank you. I'm going to change the order just for Kat and the interpreters. This is going to go into spaz now, just so you know.
He moves the music stand to the left, then adjusts and fiddles with the mic stand.
Just modifying the space. This is a piece that I wrote for a physical theatre piece I done called Death Eye, with a rapper who signs his lyrics and a dancer. And I use BSL as part of my performance because it kind of adds to the poem. But I'm going to use it sparsely to punctuate what I'm saying. And this is called Spaz.
Rowan signs, punctuated by his tongue in his lower lip. With bent arms and wrists, he crosses his hands, palms down, in front of him.
Spaz. You can call me Spaz if it'll make yourself feel better. Congratulate yourself for pronouncing all the letter. You can call me Spaz if it'll improve your self-esteem, make you think about your life and what it might have been. You can call me Spaz if that is what you're thinking, because you might as well blurt it out, because I've probably got an inkling. You can call me Spaz if you're a neurologist. You can call me Spaz if I accidentally knocked you off a cliff. You can call me Spaz just to see if I'm offended. You can call me Spaz 3 times in a 5-year friendship. You can call me Spaz when I'm an old, washed up, successful, happy has-been. You can call me Spaz for shiz, for shaz, for shazme. You can call me Spaz if you ply me with soft kisses. You can call me Spaz if you ride it on your knickers. You can call me Spaz when your nerve endings are all severed. You can call me Spaz when you've mastered one-handed origami. You can call me Spaz when you've walked a mile in my brain and found the alternative pathway. Thank you very much.
Rowan looks at the papers on the music stand and moves the stand closer to himself.
This poem's feeling a bit misty today, so I'm going to put the words there. This is called I Don't Want to Walk Like You. I don't want to walk like you. I don't want to talk like you. I don't want to walk like you. I don't want to talk like you. Because I love my voice. I love the way I walk. I love the way my hips sway and it looks like I've got a badass bop. And you don't know that it's the way that my brain talks to my muscles and my ass can't stop. I don't want to walk like you. I don't want to talk like you. I don't want to walk like you. I don't want to talk like you. Because I love my hips and the dips and the bits above it. And I love the way my lips slip and I drew knowledge. I don't want to walk like you. I don't want to talk like you. I don't want to walk like you. I don't want to talk like you. Because I love the way my shins hit into things all the time. Because each time below my knee is innocuously knocked, and the sensation takes a hold of my conscious, for the longest blink of an eye, until it eases to a throb. Each time I'm left to wonder of the pain from the softest touch could make me feel so small. My shins can be read like a book that you touch, reading the bumps from left to right, marked up and down like a braille manuscript, to tell the story of a life. Thank you very much.
He bows. Yusef, Melissa, Landon, and Jillian assemble in the conversation circle. Landon is a 5'11", deaf, cisgender male with an average build. His hair is medium undercut with a little facial scruff. He wears dark clothes to contrast his hands as he signs in ASL. He wears a dark brown and beige cochlear implant processor and is interpreted by a woman. Melissa is black of Cherokee and Welsh descent, gender variant towards the male presenting on the spectrum. They have brown skin with an average body type, 5'7", in their late 20s, with long brown locked hair, brown eyes, and is hard of sight. Sometimes they wear additional lenses. They have a nose, inner mouth, and chin piercing. Jillian is a 6-foot-tall, curvy white female, 46 years old. She has long gray straight hair and a long face with blue eyes and ruby lipstick. Landon hands a mic to an interpreter who passes it to another interpreter. She sits in the audience.
Hi everyone, my name is Landon. I'm speaking through an interpreter. I'm signing for this afternoon's conversation. I'd like to introduce our topic, which is the future of theater. It's a broad topic, but we do have some particular focus we'd like to touch on. The institution, the industry, the individual's personal experiences with rehearsals, and what we'd like to see change down the road in order to accommodate a diverse population of people. I'd like to introduce Yusef to my right. Across from me, I have Melissa, and to my left, Jill.
Landon looks at his phone.
So if the institution were able to adapt and change their accessibility accommodations, what might that look like? Typically, institutions have a one-size-fits-all category. You may be a square peg trying to fit into a circular hole. So what are your hopes for shifts down the road? I'll turn things over to you all. What would you like to see change? And that's the end of my current thought.
At the right, an interpreter signs towards the audience.
Hello, everyone. This is Yusef speaking. I've been thinking a lot recently about our training institutions, where we come from. I personally I feel quite new to theater as a whole. I only started training about 3 years ago, and I just got out of the National Theater School in Montreal, so that's my experience. And being in that institution, one of the things that I noticed was the intense focus on the holiness of text above everything else. The texts that we use, like Shakespeare, for example. Shakespeare feels untouchable in a theater school. It's like this thing that you have to reach for, that you have to attain. And there's a very this holiness of text and this idea also in many schools of sort of a person having to get into the text and sort of the reverence that we give that text. And one of the things that I really believe needs to change in that, and the way that we can move forward in the future, is how do we sort of remove the holiness label from the text and put that onto people? How do we go about and deconstruct text while giving the people who are working in it, the people who are creating it, how do we give them the power over it, as opposed to letting these texts that are hundreds of years old control our future and the destiny of where we're going with theater, where we're going with creation. And that's the end of my thought.
Hi, my name is Melissa. Future of theater. I guess for myself, I often exist in a sighted, well, we all exist perhaps in a sighted world, but I can walk in a sighted world, and this is not my first experience of not having that safety net as it is for me, but it is a time where I've not had the safety net in my back pocket, so as to say. And it's really opened my eyes to the ways that accessibility looks like for me, specifically because there are other people with different levels of sight in the room, but it's so individual that my access needs are very specific. So learning what those are in the process of needing them is kind of how it's been going. So, but I think about the time where I've created work and been present for work and been in the short time I've been in the theater world. And I wonder if I would have, if having audio description, for example, for a theater performance, I wonder if I would have enjoyed that at all, and having conversations with our audio describer for this project. I'm very fortunate I get to actually have a personal relationship with the audio describer, because we've had conversations about, if there's a black person on the screen, I gotta know that, let me know that they're black, or if someone identifies as trans, I need to know, because, I need to know where the placement is for the context of what's happening, which isn't something I really thought about when I can put on that safety net, because I can just have the experience and have the content and absorb what I'm absorbing, which is limited as well. It is from my perspective, but the training, so my point goes to the training of, let's say, ASL interpreters or audio describers, or the folks that are in position, and the note takers, positions of relaying this information or transcribing or translating this information, currently is one where they're sometimes expected to not include some of the information that I've described, or only include race or gender or ability, things like this, nationhood, if it seems relevant in their own judgment to the story. And I think currently, and in the past and in the future, in this cycle, these cycles of nonlinear engagement with life, I don't think it's ever not relevant. Especially now in this life that I'm living, I'm and it's part of what there's just so much that is lost, or is the richness is lost if the context is lost, the experience is lost. And if we take a look at who's on these stages and who's in these places, if we can't know that someone like us is up there, then we don't know that it could be us up there, so that's my final thought.
Hi, everybody. It's Jill speaking. And I'll speak to training, too, because I think that's something that is a place that we can start, too. The focus on text, yes, that's happening in a lot of schools across the country. And something that Barak said when a few days ago really stuck with me, and I've been really learning an incredible amount over the past couple of years, really, but certainly over the last 8 or 9 days, it's been very profound, and I'm still assimilating a lot of the thoughts. But something Barak said was about not changing how we, not just changing. Sorry, Barak, I'm not even sure if you're here, but changing the not just changing how we make theater, but changing the theater itself. So changing what the actual product is, and I think we have evidence of that, where we're not just trying to see how can we fit a disabled person or somebody with a disability or a blind person or a deaf person into like an assimilation model where we're trying to fit somebody into a show that is made with from an able-bodied lens, I guess, but that we're trying to actually make shows that reflect that experience and reflect that that point of view, and maybe, you know, I take Brian's point that maybe the thing is not to make the show the one-size-fits-all thing, or make the show in which a disabled person might have an opportunity, but provide the funds so that the disabled person can make their own expression and then publicize that. And that's great. That's been a great learning for me just even today and last couple of days. But in terms of the institutions, yeah, I wish that there was, I'm not sure if there were people from institutions, school institutions here, probably. But I think that's a really important conversation to start having there, because if the lessons are all about that European model and how do we fit people into the European model, instead of creation, schools that don't have creation-based teaching and don't use the bodies in the room to be the people who make the work, then we're still going to be stuck in this wheel of just repeating what was happening, you know, 100 years ago, 200, 500 years ago, you know, in Europe. So we're just going to end up with that on our stages. So I think it's big. It's a big thing, and it's a big thing to shift, because the generation right now that are running the theaters, and I'm a younger version of that, I think, right? I'm younger than most of the other, right? But am I? But the generations, I think it's going to change, because the people who are coming out of theater schools now are so much more aware of stuff. We didn't know shit. We didn't know anything. We didn't know anything. I still don't know anything. But, you know, it's not something we knew. But now I think that maybe it's social media, I don't know, but people seem politicized, and people seem to want to make change. So maybe the people who are running the institutions, it's not going to happen fast enough, but I hope that it will shift, and I hope that I will shift too. Len? Thank you, that's my final thought.
Landon signs, an interpreter speaks.
I'd like to comment on Melissa's point around audio description and described audio. I think that's a really key piece, looking at what information is left out. That's a huge issue, because the artist's language may not align with ASL interpretation or with the described audio, so I feel as though I'm missing some of the pieces. You know, information like if there's a speech impairment I wouldn't be privy to, or assumptions about whether an individual has an accent or not, I may not be given those pieces of information. That speaks to who the individual it is, and it's absolutely relevant, looking at the artist's communication and how they express themselves. So I would like to see a shift with that, starting with an institutional approach. You know, the process of the work itself and what that entails. The artist works with their own experience. You know, the institutions need to be willing to work with their experiences. The artistic directors, the producers, and so forth want us as artists to assimilate to their vision. So we are shifting and assimilating with them rather than it being the other way around, which I think really needs to happen. So that's a big piece for me, and I'm hoping down the road the NAC, for example, will establish a DIS Arts location that specifically for DIS Arts. I think that would be fantastic. We need a space and an opportunity to develop our work. Just as an idea, I don't know how you all would feel about something like that. I'll turn it over to you, and that's the end of my current thought.
This is Yusuf again. Going off what you were saying, Landon, I think that we do need spaces, and I hope that spaces become accessible to us for our work, for our all of our different adaptations. But I would also like to add to that, and I said this before earlier in the summit, but one of the big realizations coming here for me is that personally, I cannot speak for any one group because my experience is so incredibly specific. And I feel like we all have incredibly specific experiences. My experiences is based off of being an amputee, but an amputee nearly since birth. It comes off of being a Muslim Canadian. It comes off of my Lebanese heritage. So I am an amalgamation of things. I'm an amalgamation of experiences. And I wonder about the spaces that we use, and I wonder about how we can make these spaces fluid so that way they do not become institutions and 100 years from now we are Shakespeare. You know, I love Shakespeare, that is a disclaimer, but still. And that is the end of my thought.
He passes the mic to Melissa. An interpreter sits on the floor behind Melissa, interpreting for Landon.
It's Melissa speaking. Yeah, going off of what you were saying, Landon, around, like, I question, like, who these institutions are for. Like, who are these spaces for? Who are these theaters for? Who are these stages for, right? Like, when we are expected to assimilate to the institution, it just doesn't, I'm just like, hold on. Like, going back to the other conversation around protocols, it's like, I've got my protocols and you've got your protocols, but why is one prioritized over the other? You know, if these institutions wouldn't be what they are without the people, right? The museum isn't a museum without the artifacts or the art. An art gallery isn't an art gallery without the art. A theater isn't a theater without the theater. So who's making the theater? And like, if we are, it's not just what the product looks like. It's not just what the product is. It is the making of it. It is the journey of the individuals who have been chosen or involved in creating it. It is the unique experiences of experiencing light and shadow or voice, or it's all these things that give us our artistic perspectives and our exploration, right? So I just think it's a I don't know if I'm using this word properly, but maybe Eurocentric, or like this, a colonial way of thinking that you can remove a process from like a product. We're so used to going to the grocery store, grabbing the cabbage, paying for it, there it goes, right? As if it doesn't grow out of the ground, right? Or, you know, going to an art gallery and seeing, let's say, one piece from a black artist, but you don't even know because it's like probably not up there on the description. So it's I'm just not sure. When I think about what it looks like for me to be a full-time artist, does it mean working with these institutions in order to survive? Does it mean helping support the community that's been thriving from time to kind of walk away and kind of be like, you know, like if it was funding or some sort of thing that made us reliant on these structures, then let's just go figure that out somewhere else, because we're the artists and we can build something else. That's my final thought.
Melissa hands the mic across the circle. Landon signs.
My feeling about DisArts currently is that there's a huge divide between deaf and disabled arts, in theater in particular. Reason being, if there were more intersectionality and more opportunities to intersect, I think it would lead to greater collaboration. We're looking at what's currently happening right now, and many in the deaf community do not want to be involved within the disabled community or the disability community. So we need to learn how to work together, how to collaborate together. I don't feel as though that would go through the institutions. I don't feel like they're going to provide opportunities for these two communities to collaborate. That divide remains. So I agree with you, Melissa, that looking at who the institutions are for, and oftentimes deaf culture is not one of those groups that it's made for. We always need to be considerate of one another and the different pockets of experiences that we bring to the table, looking at what the purpose of theater is, what's going to happen down the road with the future of theater, and how collaboration can play into that. I think that's a key piece of it. I never thought I would find another deaf queer artist here. We have another one with us in this room, and we've got a lot of similarities and a lot of pieces to discuss, and that's a key piece of our identities. So these isolated pockets of individuals are spread out, and we don't yet have the opportunity to connect and build a community from that. So hopefully, in the future, through establishing a DisArts community specifically, we'd be able to foster and build those relationships further, and I think that would open some doors and really break down barriers for everyone. Thank you. That's the end of my current thought.
Landon signs the sign for accolades. Jillian stands to take the mic.
Is there something we could talk about that is about how we change, and I know the word institution, which is frightening to me too. I'm assuming it's frightening to you. It is absolutely terrifying to me. But the bricks and mortar building thing and the institution of Canadian theatre, what is the established practice and what is, and I know that people are different kinds of artists here besides theatre artists as well. I just use theatre because that's my background, but you start at 10 and you end at 6, and there's a break in the middle and a break in the middle and a lunch, and this is how we go. It's expected that there's about how we do fittings, how we do media, how we do so that we understand how to shift those practices or allow those practices to change to be artist-led, so that because that's how we might make a show at the NAC, but it's also how we might make a show for my small company in Newfoundland that doesn't have any house at all. It just operates because that's the way everybody seems to operate. So how do we change not just the big institutions like Canadian Stage or the Arts Club and the NAC and all of those houses, how do we change the assumption? I think that's what I'm going to leave this week with is that I have to continually challenge the assumption, and how we make the shows is part of that assumption, that it's understood, what's understood.
Jillian passes the mic to her right, then stands and hands it to Yusuf.
Hello, this is Yusuf again. I think that's a very valuable question, and my thought on it is, coming here, I had no idea of the scope or the size of artists with disabilities, artists who adapt in different ways. I only learned about this community. I only found out that there was another actor who was an amputee this year. I met Prince for a podcast series that I was doing because I realized I had no idea about physical disability beyond my own. And I am also thinking about something that was like kind of ingrained in me in high school theater classes, which was if you're 15 minutes early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. If you're late, you're fired. And coming here, I'm seeing like these different ways to communicate with one another, different ways in which we can express ourselves and communicate without language, without the English language, without time, and letting ideas breathe, sit, and grow on their own in whatever container that we use. And I feel like I'm losing my train of thought here, but I think that the way that we can move past this is by moving into a non-European, moving away from North American, European style, colonial styles of theater and rehearsal, and broadening our own knowledge of just the different ways in which people work. And that's the end of my muddled thought.
He looks at the others in the circle with the mic slightly extended. He leans to his right, and Melissa takes the mic.
It's Melissa speaking. Joe, when you were speaking, what came to mind was the Wata School in Toronto, and just how Debbie Young, who's an incredible theater performance artist, community member, mentor, etc., has been doing the work that she's been doing for as long as well before I came to Toronto, like in many of the beginnings of my understandings of the arts scene in that area. She's one of those leaders, and the Wata School is like chronically underfunded. It is chronically about to close down. It is chronically undersupported monetarily, even though the community is behind it substantially. One of the challenges it's run into is, because it labeled itself first as not first, in what I've known it as a school, it couldn't receive the kinds of arts funding that other places could because it was considered a school. Meanwhile, she's taking up a different model of not charging tuition so that Black artists can, in that way, a barrier-free situation, finally create. Or not finally create, we've been making the work, but to get it out on stages that might not be otherwise accessible, or developing and training that might not otherwise be accessible. And I think about that, I'm like, how can that be? There's been incredible performances, and not just our company, but Band Gallery, or all these places in Toronto, and I speak to Toronto because that's where I've spent most of my time, where Black-led run spaces are just chronically underfunded, or like disappearing, or being raided, and I don't know why. Or even just spaces that generally, let's just be honest, spaces that Black youth especially take up in different parts of the community are always more heavily policed, or if more than 2 Black people are gathering in a space, or more than 2 Native people are gathering in a space, it's cause for concern, and it's like, how are we supposed to get together to make some art here? Like, how are we what are we doing here? But I think about the future of theater, or the future of art making outside of its, I guess, categories, because what does theater mean, really, I guess? Is it street performances that happen kind of ad lib? And I think about, we have a serious problem on our hands around who is receiving funding, and it's not that people aren't wanting to show up to the stage. It's that there's a metal detector, there's a bag check, there's there's all this happening before you can even get to the door. So that's my final thought.
Melissa holds the mic out, then passes it behind them to an interpreter sitting on the ground. Landon signs, an interpreter speaks.
That's an awesome point, looking at who receives funding and how the community decides who deserves it, and not so much who deserves it, but who has access to the funding. You know, typically that's done through grant applications, and that's usually a one-way approach to fit their system, to match whatever they're looking for. You don't often have options. You know, perhaps I would like to send a film or a signed grant application. In a perfect world, I'd have the ability to do that. You know, I did do one signed grant application in the past, but if you don't have the English vocabulary to produce your 500-word description about what you need the money for, you may not get it. And that whole process is very overwhelming for a lot of deaf actors, and many give up on the process because they can't go through it. I know there's a number of deaf individuals that have projects that they want to fund, but the process in securing funding itself is a barrier. So for the future of theater, I think there should be options for the applicant in terms of how they can apply for those funding opportunities. Perhaps they'll accept, linguistic diversity or cognitive diversity. You need to provide access to a diverse community of people, not this one size fits all again. And for me, filling out a document with their word requirements doesn't really align with what I want to do. I'm just wondering how you all would feel about having a diverse number of options available to applicants looking for funding. What are your thoughts on that? And that's the end of my current thought.
Jillian takes the mic.
I think it's a really great idea. I'd love to, I haven't been involved in the new chapter, for example, the new chapter grants at Canada Council. And I know that things are shifting quite, it's violent, isn't it? What's happening at Canada Council is probably wonderful, what's happening, but it's very fast. And so I can't speak to what's happening there right now, but I know the juried look at funding. Yeah, there is in the old days, like 5 years ago, I guess, the jury would get together and look at something. And yeah, I think that we have the technology now that somebody could do a video application, or, I do think it's a really good idea if we could have an equity officer in the room. I know that this is impossible probably with the size of the equity staff right now, but an equity officer in the room all the time at the juries, because the equity officers could really help contextualize things for juries. I've been on several juries, and if somebody's English is not great or their grammar isn't great, they can actually lose points for that, because when you're in a jury, somebody is reading the application and desperate to find reasons to cut you out, because 500 people apply and they're only going to fund 50, maybe. So the juries are kind of desperate to find reasons to, and if somebody doesn't look like they've spent a lot of time on their application, or if somebody is, again, bad grammar, or, they have trouble with something, or they're, the numbers don't work out or something. And to have an equity officer there who can help contextualize, maybe that would help. Or to allow for a video submission, or to allow for a proxy submission, or to have somebody who could help a person write the grant. I don't know, those are options, but I do recognize that would be a barrier that might need some help. And that's my final thought. That was Jill.
Jillian offers the mic around the circle.
Any thoughts to add?
She passes it to an interpreter who speaks for Landon.
typically people with cognitive diversities do need some fluidity and some flexibility with the language. I absolutely agree with you. My challenge is in terms of the script and the application. It's in frozen English. It doesn't give, there's not a standardized way to interpret a specific frozen English text into ASL. There are many ways to do it for a script that one may be working from, and also for applications as well. So if you were reading a script as a deaf individual, or sorry, if I as a deaf individual wrote this script and the jury was reading that, they may not understand what I'm getting at because it doesn't translate into frozen English. The languages aren't equivalent. There's no way to represent in frozen English what I'm trying to convey in a visual ASL mode. So the way that I want to express myself through a visual language is not recognized by how the institutions want us to express ourselves. And so I don't necessarily think that an equity officer would be able to help with that. Also, with vulnerable, marginalized communities, I'm from Vancouver, BC, a lot of the many deaf individuals want assistance with their English skills, but the organizations and institutions aren't willing to help them with that. They're brilliant theater performers, but in terms of looking for funding and filling out applications from the larger institutions, it poses as a huge challenge and barrier for them. And that's the end of my current thought.
Landon looks around the circle, smiles and nods to his right, smiles again.
Hello, this is Yusuf speaking again. Thinking about what you were saying, Landon, I'm wondering now about if we cannot get support, if we do not get the supports that we need from certain institutions or some of the models within these institutions, how should we go about trying to change these institutions, or should we be going about trying to build and develop new ones, like new spaces, new communities, or should we be going to what's already established? This is something that I'm struggling with, trying to create my own work. Do I go to a company who has a mandate that is similar to my beliefs, or do I create something in order to fully represent my paradigm, my belief system? And I open that up to the three of you. That is my final thought.
Thanks, Yusuf. It's Melissa again. I might lose this thought, but I was reminded when you were saying that, you know, like, okay. So before I came here, it's happened, I guess, before, but I guess this time in my life and this time in my art, it's just a particular space that I've come into this place in. And I guess before I came here, I was wanting to put on an exhibit around visibility, both around like an invisible disability, the act of sight or sense of sight, and the visible minority, or how you the still in this place and time. And so and I was struggling to figure out how to do that. I was like, how am I going to let others know, experience how I see through the art that I make? Because if I'm making visual art, it just seems like a I don't know how I'm going to do that. And then just being able to see how I see the floors out in the lobby, and seeing the way that the lights and projections are working, I'm getting it. I'm like, it's happening in real time, like my understanding of art creation for myself, for the ways that I want to show people. So I guess just in saying, like, when we talk about, you know, I'm still stuck in the same way, I guess, as a metaphor, like what I'm talking about as a metaphor to, if, like, we're still kind of reliant on the structure or this funding model or this way of accessing, like, money especially, I guess. And what if we're just stuck, like, in this thought pattern of like, okay, how do we do it? How do we do it? How do we do it? And if it's like, you know what, we're spending too much energy trying to figure out how to do it. Let's just go and build something else from the ground up. But what if we're like looking at it backwards? You know, like what if we've been in our bodies in community much longer than we've ever been in institutions as we have? You know, what if I have been in my sight for my whole life? So why am I now struggling to learn how to see, right? I know already how I'm seeing, and I know how to create art in those ways. So I guess maybe just flipping our perspectives to coming from really what we know when we embody ourselves, because I think the answers are a lot easier than maybe we've been like taught in academia or other ways of knowing. Yeah, that's my final thought.
Melissa offers the mic across the circle, holds it, then passes it back to their left.
I'll go off of that. Hi, this is Yusuf again. Thank you for bringing that up, because I feel like I can share this here. I was very comfortable growing up as an amputee, incredibly comfortable with my body in space, all of that. But when I started pursuing the arts as a career, I came up against this whole wall of this struggle of how my body should be in the space, and most of that came from myself, not necessarily the institution, but like stepping into an institution, stepping into something different from yourself, something that has a history and a method. I feel like there's an instinct to want to take that on in a way. And it took me a very long time to realize that I had to adapt, and that my body in the space was what I was there for, not for the institution's credibility or the institution's strength, but for my own strength. And there's a very interesting kind of thought there in terms of, well, what are should our institutions be trying to build themselves up, or should we be trying, I'm going to rephrase that. Should we be trying to build ourselves up through these institutions and then step away from them? Or should we be trying to pursue different methods to train ourselves, and different methods of interacting, maybe like someday in the future moving away from grants entirely and a whole other funding model comes up? I don't see that happening soon, but we are speaking about the future, and that is my final thought.
He hands the mic behind him to the interpreter sitting on the floor.
Thank you so much. This is Landon speaking through the interpreter. Thank you for that point, Yusuf, looking at individuals having the right to produce their own work and the right to be in their own bodies. I've noticed that producers often bring somebody in as a token, as a one-time deal, but they don't often continue the work with that particular community, or rarely do they continue to work with the community. From my point of view, you know, I make my own work for myself. There's always an overlay of ASL, and I'm hoping that theatrical companies will continue to work and collaborate with the deaf community and other groups as well. That's a key piece for me, is that that work doesn't end after the project is done, that it continues. And most people with disabilities or deaf individuals do not have formal arts training, or rarely do they have formal arts training. So I'm hoping down the road that education will provide those opportunities to these communities, that it'll be less of a financial burden, so it can kind of promote and enhance the interest of people with disabilities or deaf individuals to become engaged within the arts. I met with a former trainer that went to Gallaudet University. It's a university based out of the States, and they don't have any formal training for deaf individuals in higher education. They typically get their training from within the community itself. Gallaudet, the tuition to attend there is like $40,000 for 1 year. It's, you know, that's fucking big ass money. I wish I could have gone to Gallaudet University, but I had to let go of that idea because it wasn't reality. It wasn't realistic. You know, we don't have opportunities here in Canadian context for individuals that come from a different culture. So I think that piece is missing as well. We all have our own experiences. If we're able to work with mentors and create these collaborations and networks, I think it would create more exposure for artists. And I think we're a little bit deprived of our exposure to theater. I've never collaborated with a hearing producer in the past, personally speaking. Was that clear? I hope so. And that's the end of my current thought. I'll turn it back to you three.
Jillian speaking.
Well, I'll ask you guys. Let's say that I was able to, I guess what you're saying, sorry, I'm jumping here, but this is all the same thought. But back to what you were talking about, Melissa, about Wata. You know, I had a really, I know, I hear what you're saying, and I actually really know what you're saying is true. I had a really very difficult lesson taught to me last year that I'll be honest about, which is that we started a mentorship program here because I wanted very much to see more persons of color audition for us, because I auditioned all over Canada and I've seen nearly 1,000 people, and I would say I saw 50, 80 people who were persons of color in those auditions. Very few people came out. Now, I understand now, because I really investigated that, why that was, because there's systemic barriers, inequity people first. So there was all kinds of things behind that, and it was absolutely our fault, but I didn't know it at the time. Oh, we've got to close it up? Okay. I'm closing it up. But it was, I just wanted to say that I'd be happy to talk to you about that, because I think that's a really important program they're doing. Okay. Thank you. That was my final thought. Because it's time, and I have to go.
Landon takes the mic.
I'm just checking in to see if this is Landon speaking, I'm sorry. I'm just checking in to see if there's any last thoughts before we wrap up. You good? Okay, this is it, everyone, and I'm going to pass this on.
Olivia and Debbie stand at 2 mics and music stands in the performance area. Debbie uses bejeweled orange crutches. Sage is on the right, interpreting. Sage is a tall, curvy, light-skinned, non-binary femme deaf person in their late 20s with wavy brown hair. Landon and Melissa sit knee to knee, front left. Landon signs ASL into Melissa's open hands. They have their eyes closed. Olivia, who plays Doctor, is a 5'5" female Caucasian with an average body type in her early 20s. She has medium-length brown hair. She occasionally wears hearing aids. Debbie plays the character named 40.
Hi, I'm Debbie Pedersen. This is a short excerpt from a short piece that I wrote called The Way of the Water. And it takes place in a urologist's office. There are 2 characters. One is named 40, who is celebrating her 40th birthday, and the other is named Doctor, who is the doctor.
And relax.
She removes her fingers from my person, adjusts the sheet for modesty. She's a bit of a rock star urologist, best in the country, if you'll pardon the pun. Wrote a book with a cheeky title, Pardon Again. I had to wait a year for this appointment, and this, I hope, explains why I would choose to celebrate my big 4-0 in such an unconventional manner. This was the first date I was offered. I thought if I held out for a less auspicious occasion, I'd be risking getting washed away in a flood of my own piss before help could arrive. I'm having trouble holding my water.
The bladder is a hollow, muscular organ. The bladder wall includes a smooth muscle known as the detrusor muscle. The urethra is a narrow tube connecting the bladder with the opening. Surrounding the urethra are sphincter muscles, which help to control the release of urine from the bladder. As the bladder fills, nerves in the bladder and surrounding area send messages to the brain via the spinal cord. Once you make the choice to urinate, the nervous system takes over and the process becomes automatic. The detrusor contracts and the sphincters relax to allow the urine to flow. In people with multiple sclerosis, the bladder doesn't send the necessary messages to the brain. Simply thinking about emptying the bladder is often interpreted as a decision to urinate, and the process of contracting the detrusor and relaxing the sphincter begins before the individual has time to prepare. Sometimes just asking where the restroom is can initiate the process.
My bladder hates me.
If the individual also suffers limb stiffness, those symptoms will increase when the bladder is full.
So the faster I have to move, the slower I go.
This situation creates stress, which magnifies all other symptoms. If manual dexterity is already compromised, it will become worse, making the unfastening of buttons and zippers almost impossible.
You're joking.
Storm. Ideal conditions for an accident. When all these factors line up, you are incontinent.
Incontinent. As if I'm unable to contain myself, the substance of who I am spills out inappropriately, like someone who always gives too much information, out of control. And then I void myself like a canceled check, a thing without value. Is this what you mean when you call me incontinent?
The Oxford English Dictionary defines incontinent as unable to contain, retain, or keep back, referencing phrases like incontinent of secrets, of coin, of spleen, of tongue. It can also mean straight away, forthwith, at once, immediately, and without delay. And while the dictionary does reference an inability to retain natural evacuation, the primary definition of incontinent is wanting in self-restraint, chiefly with reference to sexual appetite.
Gracious, doctor, if you're going to talk like that, you'd better put your fingers back in my yaya, forthwith, immediately, and without delay.
Let's begin again. Squeeze, hold, release.
Still can't feel it.
Squeeze, hold, release.
This isn't normal, is it? This doesn't feel like a normal thing to do, this lying here with your fingers up my chocha.
Squeeze, hold, release.
But this is what you do every day. Women come in here and you help them pee or not pee by sticking your fingers in their ancient pussies.
That's right. Squeeze, hold, release.
It's bizarre.
Squeeze. Though far from normal, incontinence affects 25 to 40% of women. Release. Among older women, the rate is closer to 50%.
So if I'm in, say, a theater with 50 other women in it, between 12 and 25 of them are trying not to wet the upholstery.
Correct. Squeeze.
Nervously waiting for intermission.
Hold.
Trying not to think of waterfalls.
Hold.
Babbling brooks.
Hold.
Clear, cool mountain streams.
And release.
Careful.
There are a number of strategies. Squeeze. Drugs, Kegels, hold.
All these women with their minds preoccupied with peeing.
Bladder retraining, Botox injections, hold.
Losing track of the plot, missing key moments because they're busy having a little chat with the bladder.
Detrol, Oxytrol, Ditropan, hold.
Every second, older woman struggling to maintain control, to avoid humiliation.
Sanctura, Enablex, Vesicare, hold.
Mentally unable to keep up normal life.
Implants or surgical procedures to enlarge the bladder, hold.
Their high-maintenance bladders turning them into doddering little old ladies preoccupied with worries of intermission lineups, crowded lobbies, or vague acquaintances who want to chat.
And release.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Just for people who were not over in this zone, there was both deaf interpretation by Sage, thank you to Sage, and also Landon was doing some visual interpretation, visual ASL with Melissa. So thank you to them and thank you to the performers.
So this is Sarah speaking, and that brings us to the end of this fantastic day, a day filled with incredible words, feelings, exchanges of truths, ideas, questions, so much, so much. And to speak to the next thing that's on the menu, dinner is happening around 5. And we hope you'll join us for some food. And it's in partnership with the British Council. And we're also at, we hope, a point of some new surprises that are going to be arriving with dinner, and then following dinner in the Inclusion Lounge tonight with another DJ'd event upstairs tonight by Haida Musad tonight, and it was such an incredible night last night with some wonderful performances up there last night, and I am anticipating some more wonderful surprises up there tonight. That's my current thought.
This is Cyrus speaking. So today was all about receiving, engaging, and taking in. Tomorrow is going to be all about responding. So just a reminder that tomorrow we'll be back in here at 10 o'clock, and we have some more surprises in store for you.
Sarah and Cyrus look into the audience.
Sure. Welcome, Kazumi.
Kazumi is of Japanese descent, has salt and pepper hair, and uses an electric wheelchair. Sarah adjusts the mic. Kazumi wheels up to the performance area.
Thank you.
Yeah. But also, this is my new song to people with disabilities. My funny Valentine, sweet call me Valentine, you're my favorite of mine. You're unlaughable, unforgettable. Yeah, you're my favorite work of art. You're I forgot the word. But no, care for me. Yeah, you care for me. Stay, little Valentine. Stay. It's Valentine Day. Thank you.
Cyrus and Sarah each give Kazumi a hug.
The fact that Kazumi Tsuruoka, one of the leaders of our milieu here, wants to be my Valentine is giving me my full life. So I need a minute to go collect myself, but thank you so much, Kazumi. And there'll be more surprises up in the Inclusion Lounge later, just a little flag. Let's break and eat. That is my final thought. Thank you.
Cyrus and Sarah hug. Lights dim.